A few days ago I asked you guys what are your biggest Terraria hot takes, and I got a couple hundred responses, and I think it'd be fun to go over them. Obviously some of these will be more reasonable than others, but I wanted to ask, how valid are Terraria's hot takes? Starting off with cool_guy here, Plantera isn't as good of a boss as people make it out to be, because most of the fight is just spent circling the boss, and to be honest, phase 2 is also really boring. If I could give this man one thing, it would be a true. Don't get me wrong, it's still a great boss fight, but by no means is it one of the best. You do really spend most of your time just circling around, avoiding a few projectiles, but for the most part doing the same thing over and over. And when you reach the second phase, as long as you have a big enough arena, there is basically no challenge. Funnily enough, I've always found the first stage of Plantera to be the easiest, and I don't think that's really a great thing. Obviously, the second phase should be, well, harder. I don't hate Plantera, I think it's a fine boss fight overall, it's just not one of the best. B-Cubed says fishing is by no means grindy. A casual daily quest each day can get you a nice fishing setup that makes everything fishing related fairly quick and very beneficial. Now, I am of the opinion that fishing in Terraria is actually a fine mechanic, or at the very least people overblow how long or tedious it is, absolutely. But I would never say that fishing is by no means grindy. If you're just there doing a Terraria playthrough on your own, fishing can be pretty tiresome. I find fishing to be the most enjoyable when I'm in a call with a few of my friends, or I'm playing with other people and I'm able to just do something else while I fish. Fishing is very beneficial, but I view it more as like a side thing that you can do if you really need better items, rather than a really fun activity in the game. Terraria's combat system wasn't well designed in its core. Yeah, I don't really know how to defend this one. The bosses are pretty fun, the combat is pretty fun, there are a lot of really cool weapons. I'm gonna play defense here and say one thing. I think you could very well argue that Terraria's combat system is really only good on PC. It is designed obviously for keyboard and mouse, and if you're playing on mobile, or especially with a controller, it is a nightmare. A few years back, I played Terraria on the PlayStation 4 for a few hours, and after that, I immediately said, okay, I'm done with this. The PlayStation 4 controls are so bad, and I assume it goes that way for basically every other controller because Terraria is not made for a controller. So in that sense, I guess you could say Terraria's combat system isn't perfectly designed, but that's really the only thing I can give this person. Golem was cool when he was introduced, or at least he was in my little boy's eyes, and his hatchet was the coolest thing ever. It's soul crushing to see him get so much hate nowadays. Hey, I can definitely relate to this one because when Golem first came out, I also thought he was awesome all those years ago, but if we're being completely honest, in hindsight, obviously Golem is not a great boss. He has a somewhat cool looking design, he has some great boss drops, but the gameplay itself is very bad. He's way too easy for when you discover him, he is spammy but not a threat at all, and in general he really doesn't offer anything fun. I think most of Golem's problems ultimately boil down to the arena. It's just way too small most of the time, and because of that, Golem is kind of balanced around that. We've already talked plenty about Golem on the channel though, so let's move on. Classes don't exist. There's no class selection, restrictions, or anything. The community just started hallucinating them as an inherent part of the game, especially when it involves falsely believing sticking to one damage type is necessary or required. It makes sense as an informal thing to describe builds/playstyles, but again, people exaggerate. I totally agree that people kind of exaggerate how important it is to stick with a specific class, because throughout the entire game, multi-class setups actually work very well if done right. With that being said though, the ability to ignore sticking to a specific class in Terraria does not mean they do not exist. I mean, it's literally in the descriptions of certain items. Some weapons help with range damage, some melee, some magic, some summoner. Those are the 4 classes. I don't know man, I agree people exaggerate, but they're definitely in the game. Some NPCs are totally useless and totally replaceable. Pirate, die trader, etc. Hey, I'm not going to accept any die trader slander around these parts, okay? He's actually pretty cool. But yeah, obviously there are some NPCs in Terraria which are pretty bad. For example, the pirate captain and the stylist definitely don't need to be in the game, and I have no idea why they still are. I mean, I guess they look kinda cool, but they don't really offer anything beyond that. One of the biggest problems in this game is the new player experience. I've tried to get several people in the game, but most of the time they quit before the first boss, because they don't have any idea what to do and they keep dying over and over again. True. I think as time goes by, the community will start to completely accept this fact. Terraria is really bad for new players. It's the kind of game where the second you actually know what you're doing and you beat the game, you're gonna keep playing it over and over again, but if you're new, you might just quit before you you even realize how much there is to see. Someone's either gonna have 2 hours on Terraria or 2,000, and very few people are actually in between. A lot of players tend to treat the game like a kind of boss rush and really lack an appreciation for exploration, building, or really getting to know their world. People seek efficiency in getting to hard mode and beating Moonlord above all, so they can sometimes optimize the fun out of anything that's not directly combat related. I love the combat in Terraria, but I also think it's worthwhile to take some time making the NPCs happy, building a base I can be proud of, or collecting fun decorations and vanity items. The bosses are definitely great, but they tend to force players down the track of min-maxing instead of playing the game how they'd really like IMO. I find it hard to call this a hot take even, but I do see what he's saying, and I totally agree. People definitely prioritize rushing bosses in Terraria above all else, and I agree that for most people that's probably not the way to go. I used to play the game in a very similar way, but recently I've taken a step back, focused more on building, exploring, and getting everything I can in my worlds, and trust me, I have enjoyed Terraria more recently than I ever have before. And that's all of the hot takes for today. Make sure to leave a comment saying what your hot takes are for Terraria, or giving your thoughts on what we've talked about so far, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.